Hey, yo, what a div, y'all. Let's get right into it. Today, I want to go ahead and actually take some time to update a guide that I've made previously. Going into Free Share League, I talked about how I would be league starting Sanctum or Free Share League, it was an event, but you get the idea. So about how I'd league started Sanctum, and I want to go ahead and update that with now that I've done it and had some other thoughts about it, as well as especially with the context of what's coming in this league. Here's the video, right? This idea is just to give you a route, one route. It's not the route, just a route of progression that you can follow to get yourself into the Sanctum at the pace that you would like to be. And, immediately start making buku bucks, assuming it still makes buku bucks, right? A part of this introduction before we get into it is, of course, a disclaimer about the fact that part of why this was so late, because originally my plan was to have this video out like, say, Saturday or even yesterday, but I've been waiting on the looming Sanctum nerfs to show up in the patch notes finally via refreshing. And after the big drop from last night, I decided we're going to send it. And if things change that are relevant to this guide, I will drop them in a pinned comment with extra notes about it there. That way I can get this out because I have builds to talk about and I can't keep this video in the pipeline forever. So with all that said, let's get into it. As with all routes of progression on League Start, it of course has to begin with the campaign, which I'm not doing a full on, like, here's how you run the campaign quick thing, because you should already know how to do that. Or more specifically, if you don't already know how to do that, there are significantly better resources that I probably learned from at one point or another to learn these things, whether it be lurking around in like Ventura or Tai stream, or, going through like Balar's videos or whatever it may be. There are tons of better resources out there than me for how to level quickly. So I'm not going to teach you that. What I'm going to talk about here, though, is based on the fact that you've somewhat learned this, right? I'm talking about a roughly 6-hour campaign, which, if it sounds unattainable to you, it's actually not that bad, because the recommended benchmark usually for fast campaign runners is sub 5. And if you think sub 5 is fast, that's just 30 minutes in act, which if you're taking longer than 30 minutes in act, there are an insane amount of things that you can clean up in the not ridiculously optimized areas to get that down. So again, if you want to like how to get into that range, it's a couple tips to give you, right? Have a guide or a build to follow, even if it's your own, just having like the notes of what you need to do, right? And more importantly, knowing this, not just needing, like, you're not trying to like be constantly reading your POB like, fuck, what gem did I need again? Like, that's bad. No, you should know what gem you need, right? Like I was doing some cold dot practice a couple days ago, right? And I'm sitting there leveling cold dot. I need to know that cold snap is a gem that I can take immediately after killing Fidelitas, because that's a gem that's in the same area as the heralds and skitter bots, right? Or, if you're going to do Spellslinger leveling, you need to know that Spellslinger is available at 24, but you're not going to actually use Spellslinger immediately at 24. You're planning to wait till 28 when you get another skill that can be Spellsling to then actually add that into the setup, right? Having these notes and details prepared for yourself is important, and it is definitely the largest time saver in your campaign run. So that's what majority of this section really is. It's just me telling you to get a plan and learn the plan. You save so much time there. In fact, actually, in the words of a friend of mine, layout reads are a waste of time and you should feel bad for learning them. Genuinely. The people who need to understand layout reads do not need this section of this video and probably have already skipped ahead to the next section. Now, with that in mind, a good plan and some hydration, you're cruising. And the only other note there that's like super specific to this guide is that you may or may not kill Kitava at the end of it, which we'll talk about upcoming. Quick reminder to, subscribe to the channel, especially if you want to be notified when we post other builds, like builds here, other guides, especially more Sanctum content or anything of the sort. If you're just interested in general PoE stuff, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know when we're posting. Also, I do stream on Twitch and I do hang out in my Discord a lot. You can catch me in those. Those are links in the description. Back to the video. Speaking of not killing Kitava, the main thing is that after the campaign, the big step is that we are usually somewhere in the 60s, maybe, if you're kind of over XPing a little bit when you finish the campaign or are almost done with the campaign. And we want to be in the 80s, ideally, for going into Sanctum with enough, we want good XP, good damage going in. Now, there are two main routes to do this. Usually it's in the form of either heist or mapping, right? Because you can enter heist without having to actually kill Katava and get the XP and currency from in there to trade your way up to what you need, or you can map. Now, before I talk about them in detail, here's a quick overview comparison. Heisting, you get to save the 30 all res that Katava will steal from you in exchange for not getting the 2 skill points that you get from the end, the like Bringer of Dawn quest or whatever it's called, right? That quest you get that you pick up the 2 skill points from Lonnie, you don't get those skill points. Also, you get better money, honestly, out of going into Heist just because the chaos recipe is so quick to complete in there, and that's a pretty substantial thing that you do for money. And you're in Sanctum quicker, ideally. Like you're aiming to be in Sanctum that first night. Night here being defined as really within the first 12 hours of play. Realistically, even like sub 10 hours would be even better, right? Comparatively to mapping, where you actually, again, you get those 2 skill points in exchange for having to gear a little bit more around your reses earlier on. But you also then get to do league mechanics and whatnot, which give you better XP and in some cases better rewards depending on the mechanics you choose to do, or are better tuned towards getting you gear, right? Maybe you go mapping because you want the gold for gambling on the black market and you're just doing low tier essence farming or whatever that you can do safely to get yourself some gear and some XP and push that way. Or you're going to push the Atlas, whatever it may be. The only thing is that usually I'd say if you go this route for getting your character ready for Sanctum, you're aiming for a night 2 or even day 3 transition into Sanctum. And that's an important detail. We'll get to that in a moment, right? Now, again, remember, this is about taking less than 6 hours in the campaign. So I have some quick conclusions based on your expected pace of time on that note. Make them faster or slower based on your campaign time. Heisting is an approach for people who are slower in mapping or Atlas progression, or really just dislike mapping and would like to get into the Sanctum ASAP, right? Now, alternatively, if you are actually a pretty fast Atlas progressor, or you really want to actually like progress the Atlas, especially like if you're like me personally, I'm really interested in the new Atlas stuff. And so I'm going to be rushing through that and then looking at transitioning into a Sanctum build afterwards. And so like the Atlas method is going to be what I'm following. But those are that's generally the idea. Now, some quick thoughts about the approach for each one. If we talk about doing Heist, skip Katava and go into the harbor pretty immediately, and you should be buying Wakano contracts pretty much any moment starting in like Act 7 or Act 8, quite frankly. Just go grab some contracts from for chances, come back, Do that as many times as you can earlier on, because then you're going to, there's limited refreshes because we do not have the Book of Regression recipe that was originally in the game back when the Infinite Heist strategy first came around. Make sure to set up and use the chaos recipe tool. It saves a ton of time, and that recipe is an essential part of the strategy. And so I will have that linked in the description, and you can find like videos on how to set it up and whatnot. And don't worry, it is entirely within TOS. I would not be recommending things to you if they were against TOS. Promise. Right? You're not doing anything illegal there. You just are making your life easier. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that Heist is really, really good for chaos recipe, and that's because Heist provides some of the most jewelry in the game, quite frankly, specifically unidentified jewelry, and that tends to be the bottleneck for setting up the chaos recipe. So, keep that in mind. You're going to be targeting lockpicking, counter thaumaturgy, and perception rooms as you're aiming for currency and jewelry rooms, and these are the contracts that give you the most of those, but you will do any contract you can get your hands on. Again, those are just like the priority if you're like limited on chance orbs or whatever and just need to get a couple real quick. Now, this is only an ideal strategy for a couple of hours. Again, you're aiming to be out of this part of your progression during the first night so that you can get into the Sanctum. On the other side of this fence, mapping. Blast out some new mapping content, right? Get the Atlas pushed. I would try not to get too distracted chasing down new tech. Your focus is more so getting your character stable and farming, right? You shouldn't need too much from me if you're really good about your Atlas work already, because you just know like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, that, this, the third, progress the Atlas this way, get my gear this way, whatever. The real ballpark is that you were just trying to get yourself some XP and get yourself some money so that you can very quickly convert into your build. Again, talking about end of day 2, early day 3 at the absolute latest. Make sure you're leveraging the currency exchange to liquidate things that you would otherwise like just have sitting in your stash. Scarabs you're not going to use, fragments you're not going to use, etc. Right? Make sure you're still doing the chaos recipe, right? Especially with the black market in the game, you don't really actually need to ID stuff as much anymore, and you definitely can just leverage the chaos recipe to get yourself some more money. And the last note I have here is just about the fact that like intermediate builds are really, really, really effective at this in this ballpark. Right? Let's say I'm looking at playing Penance brand of Dissipation on a Cultist or Elementalist. I've done it before, right? I could consider playing a DD Elementalist or like, well, before a Fire Trap Elementalist, right? Like standard Ignite stuff, and just scale that character through maps very, very cheaply, and then full swap the entire character over to Pete Ballad afterwards, right? Or maybe I'm thinking like, my Sanctum build of choice right now would be Penance brand of Dissipation Hierophant if I were starting in Sanctum. And so I'm thinking I'm going to play like I'm going to play a Mana Man or something initially, and then immediately switch over once I'm ready to go instead of investing deeper into mana, because the mana stuff is really, really strong early, right? If you're looking at attacks for it, right? Maybe you're thinking about doing Volcanic Fissure. I mean, your Volcanic Fissure character just works all the way through there, right? Whatever it may be prepared. Like the idea of having an intermediate build is very powerful. Make you like utilize that strength. That's like generally the difference between Heist and mapping. I think they're both perfectly fine strategies. The one note, and I'm leaving this note again here because we do not know exactly how Sanctum is getting changed yet, right? At least at the time that I'm recording this video. In fact, actually, it's entirely possible that the night I record this and post it, I will look at refresh like late in the night, and suddenly there's a nerf to Sanctum in the patch notes, and there will be a pinned comment by the time you're watching this video. So if you've already seen the nerf or you hear something about the nerf, check for a pinned comment, or like come ask in the Discord or something, and I'll tell you like if anything has to change regarding this plan. Alrighty, so with all of that taken care of initially, now you're ready to enter the Sanctum. And so let's do first things first, quick little checklist. Make sure you didn't miss anything, right? 1, do you have at least 500,000 DPS? Ideally more. Like I personally aim for 1 million or higher, but 500,000 is good enough for 69 and 70 books, right? But ideally significantly more, right? Ideally have at least 3 labs done, but you should probably get your 4th, right? You can just buy the fragment without ever having to do one of the lab trials and maps. And so getting your 4th lab, if your build actually benefits from it, do that. Do you have the starting capital to actually be able to afford to buy some tomes so you can get in there? And then ideally a little bit of gold to be able to use the currency exchange, especially because you cannot actually drop any gold in Sanctum. So you might have to go, like get the Blood Aqueducts, or again, you should get it from like Heist or something. Or if you went mapping first, you probably have a nice stack of gold to work with. Now, assuming you've got all that taken care of, I've just got a couple small tips for you to keep in mind as you do the content, because otherwise, I mean, you're in Sanctum, baby. You know how to do this, right? Or you should at least. If you don't, I've got some notes for you later on, right? Area level becomes a priority to push up eventually, right? That's where the bubblegum currency routes go up. This is the thing that I'm actually the most concerned about getting nerfed in particular, is either the thresholds at which they go up or the amounts by which they go up. So, keep an eye out for a change in that regard. Currently, at the time of recording, divines are able to show up regardless of area level, but only on the 3rd and 4th floors. So again, this could change. Divines might get moved up to minimum 75 or minimum 81, at which point my notes about this will change, right? So prepare for that. And then the other thing is just do not waste that much money on upgrading your character. Once you've hit the point where you are blasting the tome that you're in, it's, can you blast 83? If you cannot blast 83 yet, that's your priority. Get yourself the damage needed to blast 83 tomes, which does not take all that long, all things considered. It's only somewhere between 10 and 20 million DPS, depending on the build. I would aim for 20 just to be safe. And then once you're there, it's either things that make you significantly faster in Sanctum, items that will be more expensive later on if you put it off for too long, or getting your relics up so you can make more money per run, right? All of that. Now, that's like my quick little tip list for starting in Sanctum. If you actually have the need for tips how to run Sanctum, it's a good thing that this video is out a couple days early, and it's probably the primary reason I wanted to put it out early, is so that you can, check out my other video. I have made a like 50 something minute comprehensive guide to Sanctum, including cheat sheets and whatnot, that I will have linked in the description, that you should look into so that you can like learn details about Sanctum, or, you know, do some practice runs ahead of time. Ask some questions in the Discord. I have videos of other builds in Sanctum as well, if you want to like look around and see what type of build, like what things feel like in Sanctum. Yeah, I have to ask a question for some in particular, but considering I have like Sanctum footage on this channel dating all the way back to Tota, there's a lot of information you can gather from the channel there, or, you know, come check out what's going on in the Discord, what people talk about. I would say on stream, but I haven't really been streaming since the weekend, because I do need to focus on making sure that the videos get out on time, air quote, right? It's not like I have a quota or anything. It's just like I desire to have the information to you guys so that you can start to prepare and consume that information going into the new league, right? And that's everything, really. I'm pretty sure I'll have more thoughts at some point, and I'll probably, again, they'll go in the pinned comment. If we get that nerf at any point, I will update my pinned comment to, you know, tell you my thoughts on those nerfs and if they impact any step in this plan. Otherwise, you know, feel free to ask any questions you have in the comments. You know, if there's any tips that you have for people who are reading the comments, and just like drop those as well. Or if there's anything that you feel like I missed in my notes here, feel free to do that as well, right? Otherwise, thank you for watching. If you want to connect with me further, you know, subscribe with notifications on so you can actually know when we're posting more videos here. Join the Discord and the Twitch, or come by the stream. Those links are in the description. Thank y'all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.